Hello my fellow gamers, dare I say, my fellow Pikmin gamers. I've returned to post another video, unless this is the first time you're seeing one of my videos, in which case welcome to the beginning of something very stupid. If you could not tell by the title, which I wrote like it was the title to a paper written in the 1700s, so that I would more easily fit in with the esteemed scientific community, I will basically be discussing the taxonomy in the Pikmin series, which is of course the greatest video game franchise on the planet. More specifically, I will be classifying all the enemies and Pikmin according to taxonomy in every single Pikmin game, except Hey Pikmin, because I refuse to acknowledge or believe in that game's existence. If you don't know what Pikmin is, I don't know why you've clicked on this video, but I can remedy this issue. Simply purchase one Nintendo Switch and a copy of Pikmin 1+2, and you will thank me later. Now, you may be wondering what makes me qualified to discuss taxonomy, and to that I say, not at all, but because I am speaking with authority on the internet, it will sound like I do, and maybe you will learn something along the way. But why make this video, you poor and lost internet user may be asking? And firstly, we know that in the Pikmin lore, the planet the crew members explore, PNF 404, is actually Earth in the far future after humans have gone extinct. So it might be interesting to see how evolution took its course through taxonomy and how it relates back to the living creatures of today. Secondly, well, because I felt like doing it. I don't know, sue me. Anyway, it's like taxonomy time or something.
I went to college!
So I need to lay out some context first, and no, I won't bore you with an entire introduction into taxonomy. All you need to know is that all living things can be sorted into 7 kingdoms, and that within those kingdoms they are further sorted into specific groups. The order of groups down is kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I'll use an example to help you understand these, as this is how everything will pretty much be sorted. Let's use humans. Humans are of course in the kingdom Animalia. We are vertebrates, which means we have a backbone, and vertebrates are among one of the groups that make up the phylum Chordata, which is just anything with a skeletal rod. We are mammals as opposed to lizards or birds or something, so our class is Mammalia. Our order is primate, which includes all monkeys and apes. Then our family is Hominidae, because we are great apes, which are known as hominids. Finally, our genus Homo denotes that we are a human species, and our species Sapien denotes that of the human species, ours is named Sapien. There used to be other human species, but they're all extinct, so rest in peace to the homies. Now that you have a basic understanding of that, we can move on. Quick note, anytime I use this color, it is to signify some sub-classification. It is not really important, just keep that in mind. Pikmin actually gives us the bottom 3 tiers of organization, family, genus, and species, for all of our little creatures. So we'll only have to work out the kingdom, phylum, class, and order, which is, for the most part, all easy except for order. I spent most of my time researching trying to sort what order things fell into, but just for starters, we'll be sorting all the living things among the 7 kingdoms. Those 7 kingdoms are Plantae, Animalia, Fungi, Protista, Chromista, Bacteria, and Archaea. But you can forget about these 3, we won't be using them at all. So really all you need to understand is every living thing in the Pikmin series can be sorted into these 4 categories. Now that you understand that, it's time to sort.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
So let's get the confusing one out of the way first. Aside from 2 specific enemies, every other entity in the Pikmin series belongs to the 3 well-known taxonomic kingdoms, because, well, I can actually see the life forms in these kingdoms without having to whip out a microscope more powerful than what they used to get the astronauts on the moon. This means, surprisingly, one of the microorganism kingdoms does make an appearance in Pikmin. This kingdom is Protista, and I will get to why and how in a moment. Let's first look at the only 2 enemies that belong to this classification. Pikmin 1's Gulix and Pikmin 4's Fulix. These 2 entities are rather unique in Pikmin, being clearly living things but not having a well-defined form, almost looking cellular. And, well, the Pikmin wiki even states that these 2 creatures are indeed amoeba-like. Amoebas are protists and are single-celled organisms that gain energy by surrounding, absorbing, and digesting its prey. Not too dissimilar from both of these guys. In fact, we can see that both of them have visible nuclei, and the Piclopedia confirms this. In fact, the Gulix has 2 nuclei, while the Fulix only has 1. In my very surface level research, I was able to discover that Paramecium have 2 nuclei, so at first I thought they may be Paramecium, which belonged to the kingdom Chromista, but it turns out Paramecium always have 2 nuclei, and we can clearly see the Fulix only has 1. The Piclopedia states that these both belong to the same family and are closely related, simply different species, indicating these must not be Paramecia. However, there are several protospecies that have 1 nucleus and those that have 2 nuclei. Not only that, many of these protists have that little tail thing sticking out of the back that the Ulix brothers have. This leads me to postulate that these are 2 gargantuan Protista species belonging to the same family, though one has evolved a second nucleus. But wait, you might be shouting. The species name for the Gulix is Siphonophorus. It's clearly a siphonophore. And while that does make sense at first, if you think about it, it doesn't quite line up. Firstly, why is the species name Siphonophorus? If it were a true siphonophore, that should be its order. But secondly, and most compelling, it is that by definition, siphonophores are a colony of cellular organisms working together to form one operating organism. Since we can physically see the nucleus/nuclei of both the Fulix and the Gulix, we know that they are a single individual cell, and even if they could be made into a true siphonophore, a single cell a siphonophore does not make. So although I'm sure this specific classification will be heavily debated, that is why I'm classifying the Gulix family as gargantuan protists. How they got so big as a single-celled organism is not my problem to solve. I am not a scientist, I am simply someone who finds problems for scientists to solve.
Want to know how to grow your own mushrooms?
This one is actually really easy. There are only 3 species that belong to this kingdom in Pikmin, and it's quite obvious which ones. We start with the 2 puffstool species, essentially mushrooms that have evolved both the ability to see and walk. There is a regular store brand species as well as the poisonous species. Although, thinking about mushrooms today, there's generally 3 types. The regular ones you can eat, the poisonous ones that kill you, and the ones that make you trip fucking balls. So does that imply there's a 3rd puffstool species somewhere out there that just makes Olimar and the Pikmin trip fucking balls? Anyway, the 3rd and final fungi species found in Pikmin is a proper parasitic fungi that has been observed infecting and using both dwarf bulborbs and slooches as hosts. It doesn't really have a name, just attaching moldy in front of the name of its host, but it's got this long scientific name in case you were curious. And really quickly, last thing for this section, you may be shouting, what about Puffman? What about Puffman? Well, Puffman only form when infected by spores from a regular puffstool. So ecologically, it's simply either a defense or reproductive mechanism of the puffstool. So no, it is not its own species. Alright, now it's time for the one that's going to take up most of the video.
It's a bear!
Nearly all of the entities found on PNF 404 belong to the kingdom Animalia. In fact, the percentage is so high that I'm literally discussing every known member of each of the other 3 kingdoms. Meanwhile here, I will only be able to summarize the different phylums/families of the Animalia kingdom. So, call me biased, but we're going to start with mammals. There are surprisingly a handful of mammal species in the Pikmin franchise, considering how small living things generally are in this series, but the most obvious one is the bearded amprat. Secondly is the blowhog family, both the grounded and airborne genera. Although they do not seem very mammal-like, their blowhole is referred to as a snout in the Piclopedia, and in Pikmin 4 they have stubby hoof-looking things, even further making it seem similar to pigs, so I think it's fair to say these are the descendants of modern swines. Very similar to blowhogs, but not classified into that family, is the tusked blowhog, and similar to them is the porquillion, which seems to be a descendant of hedgehogs or porcupines. There is also the snoot whacker family, who based on the descriptions telling us that it is indeed a trunk, and that it is also a modified nose, I think we can safely assume they are the descendants of pachyderms. And of course, last but not least, are the 2 known descendants of dogs, the ancient sirehound and the moss. That does it for mammals, so moving on then, we've got birds. And this one is also quite small, hosting the snagret family, consisting of its 2 species, which are not only ground birds who can't fly, but ones who burrow. So evolution clearly went a little crazy since as humans went extinct. Based on what Google and the Pikmin wiki say, they're based off of egrets, so I've classified them into that same order. Birds also contain one other species, which is the wattlequoth. Based on the morphology and small flightless wings, I've classified it among ostriches and kiwis. So with the classes Mammalia and Aves out of the way, we'll stay with Chordata and move on to the aquatic species, starting with fish, of which there are surprisingly only 2 species, that being the pricklepuff and the puckering blino. These were both easy to class as descendants of the pufferfish and minnows, respectively. Staying aquatic but jumping over to the mollusk phylum, there's 2 cephalopod species, with the wattlepus being an octopus descendant and the sputtlefish's closest ancestor being squids. Jumping over to gastropods, we have all the descendants of snails and slugs. So for the slugs, this includes the bloister family, the slooch family, the bog swallow, and the belching mere slug. I'm also adding the shellcake family among the gastropods as descendants of snails, as even though it was hard to classify this group, they are specifically described as having shells, and their eyes are quite similar to that of other gastropods, notably snails. We'll finish up the mollusks by classifying the pearly clamp as a bivalve, clearly being based on a clam. Staying semi-aquatic, but we're going to jump back to chordata, we'll do amphibians, which of course includes the amphituber family, most well known for the dreaded wallyhop. These are classified as frogs, as well as the calcified crushblat, which is described as frog-like. On the other side of the amphibians is the gildamander, which is a descendant of salamanders. Unfortunately, there appears to be no lizard species in Pikmin, so I guess if you want to come up with fun enemy ideas for Pikmin 5, there's a whole free class for you. Now let's go through a couple miscellaneous groups before I do the phyla I've been avoiding. Sea squirts are a type of chordata and contain the sun squish. In terms of the jellyfish phylum, there's the jellyfloat family and the medusal slurker, both which seem to have simply adapted to being jellyfish, but in the air. And finally, the Animalia phylum I've been avoiding. That is, of course, Arthropods, which is all crustaceans, arachnids, insects, and myriapods. An arthropod is basically anything that has an exoskeleton, which means instead of bones, it has a sort of plating frame on the outside of its body protecting the insides. This phylum, naturally, makes up a majority of Pikmin species, so this will be super fun to run through. We'll start with the easiest subphylum, that being myriapods. This includes both centipedes and millipedes, but there is only one of these species found in Pikmin, that being the armored maudad. It appears to be a millipede, as centipedes only have 1 pair of legs per body segment, and the armored maudad clearly has 2 legs per body segment. Pretty brutal that to beat this boss you basically have to break every single one of its bones, then beat it to death on its exposed soft flesh. Anyway, now on to arachnids. There are a lot of species that belong to this order, but they can be neatly classified into 3 families. That being the arachnorb, which includes all the longlegs bosses, the dweevil family with all the spawns of Satan, and the arachnodes. These are all of course belonging to the same order as spiders. However, there may be a 4th arachnid member, that being the crusted rumpup. It has the morphology of a scorpion, but any good evolutionary biologist is aware of convergent evolution. What's important to note is its raised tail does not have a stinger, but rather a weak point. Its face is not very arthropod-esque, but in the Piclopedia, its exoskeleton is described as a carapace, which is used to describe the hard shell of turtles, crustaceans, and arachnids. Its exoskeleton does not appear to be a simple shell, so we can cross out turtles, and it appears to only have 4 legs and a tail. Meanwhile, crustaceans typically do not use all their appendages as legs. Furthermore, the 4-leg orientation is similar to that of previously mentioned arachnids, notably the longleg and dweevil family, leading me to believe this species is most likely an arachnid, though it may not be a direct descendant of scorpions. Nevertheless, I'm putting it in the same order as scorpions. And speaking of crustaceans, we've got plenty. There is of course the crawmad family, which are most similar to shrimp, falling in that order. There is also of course the aristocrab and the segmented crabster, and we also can't forget about the grubchucker. All of these are mostly crab-like, so I'm putting them into the same order. What's interesting about the grubchucker is it appears very obviously to be a crustacean, but it has evolved quite radically in a way that appears to make it purely land-dwelling, with an open digestive pouch on the top of its shell. And they say Pikmin is a cute game. Well, that's that. I think we're done with Animalia, right? Right? Oh boy, this is the one I've been dreading. Insects. There are so many insect species in Pikmin, so I'll try to do this as fast as I can because it gets complicated. Here we go. First up is the cannon beetle species, as well as their respective larval forms. Similarly related to cannon beetles are the other beetle species, including anode beetles, antenna beetles, and the glint beetle families. I'm also throwing in the burrownit family due to their beetle-like shell. Though some species in this family have the mite name, I believe this to be a misnomer, as while mites are arachnids, the members of this family are expressed as to having a proboscis, which arachnids do not have. Furthermore, the flighty joust mite has distinctly insect and beetle-like wings, so all of these will fall among the beetle order. We also can't forget about the mandiblard family, including sheargrubs and wigs. These guys are very odd since they appear to be in a permanent larval stage, so I'm giving them their own order I made up. Then there's the skittering family, which are doing a great job at mimicry, just like the leaf bugs. Furthermore, there's the closely related flutterbee family of spectralids and 2 moth descendant species of the snowflake fluttertail and the behemoth fossbat, which, despite its weird skin underside, is indicated by its description and method of reproduction to be related to moths. All of these clearly fall into the same order. And even faster now, there's the scornets and dandlefly, which both fall into the same order, with the former being the descendant of bees and the latter damselflies. The skeeter and mucker skate are hemipterids, which includes the insect that dirigibug is based on. The snitchbug family uses their antennae to fly, which is wholly unique, so we can just assume that's a new order as well. The ravenous whiskerpillar is said to be a larval form of some unknown specimen, so we really can't place it, and it gets an unknown order. Similarly, the ujidani and honeywisp are both species with very little known about them. And despite the honeywisp's morphology, it is said that the egg it carries is not its own, simply a vessel to bring nectar to its larvae. So based on that, I am tentatively placing it among the insects, although loosely related. Both the honeywisps and ujidanis fall into an unknown order. Next are shear fleas, which we obviously can relate to fleas. Then there's mittites, which we don't know a lot about other than that they're burrowing insects with a shell, so they also get their own order. Then the shutterchuck is extremely unique, but it is specifically defined as an insect, so that will also get its own order. And this is the entire giant taxa chart for the insects, and wow, that took a long time to put together, so please appreciate my hard work. Well, that's all of them, right? Surely I'm not forgetting anything, right? There are no other notable enemies, animals, and Pikmin, right? Right? I'm sure you've noticed I have not included the Bulborb anywhere, and that is because they are quite weird, so I was saving them for last to plainly discuss my classification for them. Originally, I was going to put them in insects, but further research showed people online suggesting they were mammals, or at least descendants thereof. Well, here's all the facts of the matter. For the pro-mammal group, they point out that Bulborbs have fully developed eyes, like those seen among vertebrates. But on the other side, the grubdog family is known to have larvae that metamorphosize and molt as they mature, highly characteristic of arthropods. And we in fact see the Empress bullblack serving as a sort of queen for the red bulborbs, showing some signs of early eusociality. However, another point for the mammal column is that though the Empress bullblacks is serving the role of a queen here, she is giving live birth rather than popping out eggs. And live birth has only developed among vertebrates within mammals. But what's even more interesting is the disconnected eyes, similar to that of gastropods and even certain species of insects. So the question is it more likely that a clade of insects evolved highly developed eyes and live birth, or is it more likely that a clade of mammals developed larvae, metamorphosis, and early eusociality? Ultimately, I decided that the bulborbs are vertebrates and are likely descendant from some mammal clade, but have evolved in such a radical direction that they have created their own class among vertebrates that I have named Bulborba. I came to this decision based on 2 things. Firstly is their large upper bodies being held up by such skinny legs that even appear to have knees and are notably not segmented. As well as this, the white teeth and toenails imply an internal skeletal system, which is of course unique to vertebrates. Secondly, not only do bulborbs lack an exoskeleton, they do not appear to be fleshy and soft, but rather have what appears to be tough skin. For those reasons, I determined that bulborbs must indeed be vertebrates that have evolved so divergently from their ancestors that they must now be considered to be in their own class within Chordata. Anyway, without further ado, here that is. It's split into 2 families, that of the grubdogs and the breadbugs. Grubdogs are fairly uncomplicated, having 2 genuses and several species. That of the Ichthyosa genus with the water dumple, and the Oculus genus having the rest of the grubdogs. But there are several subspecies of Kageyami, including where it seems to be developing eusociality, which I suppose is cool. You're getting to watch evolution in real time. On the other side is the breadbug family, which includes true breadbugs, as well as a 3rd species that actually mimics 3 different grubdog species, which is pretty cool. And with that, we are finally done with all of Animalia, so we can finally move on to
a dandelion must be the last one of the season.
it is so great to have another easy kingdom again. In Plantae, we obviously have Pikmin, all 9, technically 10 species of them. They are basically plants that evolved both sentience and eusociality, which if you don't know what that is, that's what bees, ants, and wasps developed, where they all live in a nest, in this case an onion, and complete tasks for the hive. Which is all well and good, but then we get to the glow Pikmin, which are explicitly stated to be not alive and rather ghosts, though they do build a physical luminol. They're kind of an oddity. They only come out at night or in caves as well, but since the game literally states that they are not alive, despite the fact that they can be killed by enemies and have a ghost appear, then they technically don't count as being part of life and thus cannot really be classified. The other oddity of the Pikmin species is the Bulbmin, which you learn is actually a parasitic Pikmin species that has parasitized and taken over the mind of a red Bulborb. This is important context because Pikmin aren't the only sentient plant species in the Pikmin franchise. Pikmin experts who've been paying attention will notice I haven't yet mentioned the creeping chrysanthemum. In the Pikmin 2 Piclopedia, Olimar states that the creeping chrysanthemum is specifically a plant and may even be related to Pikmin. Meanwhile, Pikmin 4 added the Spartle spore, which even though has the appearance of mushrooms, it is specifically stated to be within the chrysanthemum family. And this species is actually noted to be parasitic in the same way Bulbmin are, seemingly taking over the body of some amphibian species. It is important to note Pikmin 4 also changed the design of the creeping chrysanthemum to fit with this design, which makes me want to split the Pikmin 2 and 4 creeping chrysanthemums into two species, one that is fully a plant and the other that is a parasitic plant. Technically in canon there's no difference between the two, but as an esteemed biologist I observe a difference and so I shall characterize them differently. In layman's terms, that means my headcanon says otherwise. Finally, the Pikmin series also identifies several genuine non-sentient plant species and their classification is kinda boring, so I won't be including them. But if someone really cares and pesters me enough about it, I will make a full Plantae chart with the vegetation as well. Anyway, wow, would you look at that? That's all the kingdoms and all the sentient life forms of PNF 404. I'm glad every single one of them can be classified with no exceptions. Isn't that neat and easy? Okay, so I'm basically just going to list all the Eldritch horror demons now because they have no classification and we don't really know where they come from. I'll start with Mamuda because they're the wholesome one and I don't really know what it is. It's basically just a rock that walks around and enjoys nature. But now on to the nightmare demons. First, it is suggested that the Plasm Wraith and the Water Wraith are related, but only through their names and makeup. It is suggested that the Water Wraith is in another dimension. Unless a purple Pikmin lands nearby, then it sort of becomes real. And the Plasm Wraith is in our dimension, but it's like semi-solid and can harden. They're weird. We also can't forget about whatever the fuck the Quaggled Myreclops is. It's like earthen, but it has a fruit with an eye. Maybe it's a plant technically, but it's got like fleshy toes. I don't know. But that's not even the weirdest one. Like the Smoky Prog is basically just the Grim Reaper. It's literally sentient death, targeting the onion and instantly killing Pikmin. And finally, the Gatling Groink is some type of robot thing, but it's got eyes and a cannon on its face. Oh, and don't forget when you kill it, it can rise from the dead if you don't carry it back in time. So you could argue it's literally just a death robot, but hey, Olimar says it's a living thing with its own genus and species, so take that up with him. Well, that's everything. All the living entities in Pikmin classified according to my elementary understanding of taxonomy. I hope you had fun because this video took a while. And hey, in the spirit of science, if you disagree with any of my classifications in this video, I encourage you to do your own research and suggest any changes or reclassifications in your own videos or posts. Good scientific theory is peer-reviewed after all. I don't really know what to write for this outro, but I would appreciate it if you would follow me on Twitter, though I can't promise quality posts. Anyway, thanks for watching, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time I have a video idea.